Hello everyone, welcome to my update US gossip channel. Ronnie, drenched in sweat and shame, trembled on the polished marble floor, the echoes of his hurried footsteps still ringing faintly in his ears as he knelt, his knee scraping against the cold stone, a humiliating reminder of the choices that had brought him here, his once arrogant posture reduced to a pitiful bow of desperation, eyes darting between Tracy, whose sharp gaze could cut through steel, and Jason, whose presence alone seemed to make the walls themselves lean in, waiting for the storm to break. He tried to steady his ragged breathing, but it was useless. Every inhale was a jagged reminder of the betrayal, the deceit, the lies that had woven a web around him, ensnaring him in a trap from which there was no graceful exit, no dignified escape, only the raw exposure of his guilt, a spotlight illuminating every misstep, every secret, every whispered treachery that had, over months, festered into a confrontation of epic proportions, the kind of moment soap opera legends are made of, where emotions don't simply simmer, they explode, scattering shards of truth across the room like jagged confetti. Ronnie's throat tightened as he forced the words out. Please, Jason, Tracy, forgive me, his voice cracking, an audible tremor betraying the fear he tried to mask. The bravado he had relied on now completely evaporated, leaving a man who was achingly human, painfully exposed, and, to the audience, utterly vulnerable, a figure both pitiful and compelling in his plea. And the camera would have lingered, had this been filmed, on the quiver of his lips, the clenching of his fists, the desperate, almost animalistic look in his eyes, a silent scream of remorse that words could barely contain. Tracy's lips pursed, a mixture of anger and disbelief flickering across her face, her manicured fingers tapping against the armrest of her chair in a rhythm that seemed to echo the pounding of Ronnie's heart, each tap a drumbeat of judgment, a warning that forgiveness would not come easily, and perhaps never at all. As she leaned forward, her voice cutting through the tense air like a razor blade wrapped in silk. You think a simple apology can erase everything, Ronnie? Every lie, every betrayal, every moment you've twisted the truth for your own gain? The words hung in the air, sharp and suffocating, a tangible noose tightening around him, while Jason's eyes, usually so calm, betrayed a storm of emotion, a mixture of fury, hurt, and something else, something more complicated, more intimate, more devastating, disappointment. His jaw clenched as he took a deliberate step closer, his shadow falling across Ronnie, an oppressive weight, and the silence that followed was almost deafening, a pregnant pause that seemed to stretch time itself, forcing Ronnie to confront the enormity of his misdeeds, the ripple effects that had touched everyone he loved and everyone he thought he could manipulate, a cruel lesson in humility and the fragility of human trust, a lesson soap opera audiences live for. A moment where a man is stripped of pretense and left bare before those he wronged. Tears threatened to spill as Ronnie's mind raced, every flashback, every whispered conversation, every covert maneuver replaying like a relentless montage in his head. The memories of manipulations that had seemed clever at the time now revealing themselves as the seeds of his own downfall, and with a shaky breath, he added, I never meant to hurt you. I only wanted. But the words faltered, collapsing under the weight of truth he could no longer escape, and Tracy's sharp intake of breath was a physical manifestation of the disbelief and fury she felt, while Jason's piercing stare made it impossible for him to continue, his words suspended in the air, meaningless in the face of such raw emotion. The room seemed to shrink, walls closing in, as if the Corinthos mansion itself were an accomplice, pressing down on Ronnie, forcing him to absorb the magnitude of his actions, and he sank lower, bowing his head, clasping his hands together in a gesture of pleading, almost prayer, almost desperation, a physical embodiment of the phrase humbled to the core, while Jason's voice, when it finally came, was a low, rumbling growl, tinged with the kind of anger that could ignite the air itself. Ronnie, do you even understand the depth of what you've done? Ronnie flinched, every nerve in his body screaming in response, the question a mirror reflecting every misdeed, every betrayal. And yet he nodded, words failing him completely, so he stayed on his knees, a statue of regret, his head bowed, silent except for the quiet, ragged sounds of his breathing. As if admitting guilt alone could somehow make amends, as if submission could absolve him of the storm he had unleashed, Tracy's voice rose, sharp and commanding, slicing through the tension, demanding attention. You humiliate yourself now, on your knees, begging for something you don't deserve. But maybe, just maybe, you'll begin to understand that trust, once broken, isn't easily mended, and forgiveness is earned, Not given, and Ronnie nodded again, swallowing hard, a lump forming in his throat, tears brimming in his eyes as he tried to convey sincerity, as he tried to show the depth of his remorse, as he tried to reach the hearts of those he had shattered, while Jason's expression softened, just slightly, the first hint of humanity creeping into the stormy sea of his anger, a glimmer that perhaps the path to redemption, though treacherous, was not entirely closed, and the silence that followed was deafening, almost ritualistic, a pause in which Ronnie felt the weight of his actions pressing on him, crushing, relentless, leaving no room for evasion or rationalization, only reflection, only confrontation with the truth he had tried to hide from, only the raw, unfiltered reality of what it meant to betray people who had trusted him implicitly. Sweat dripped down Ronnie's forehead as he clasped his hands tighter, almost trembling. I'll do anything to make this right. Please, please let me prove I can change. Please, he pleaded, each word a raw wound. Each phrase a confession, a vulnerability that made even the hard-hearted blink, a moment so quintessentially soap opera that viewers would clutch their pearls, gasp at the screen, and whisper fervent prayers for a resolution that might never come, for a moment of catharsis in which justice, redemption, and heartbreak collide in one explosive scene, while Tracy's eyes glimmered, her emotions a kaleidoscope of rage, pity, and disbelief, the tight lines of her mouth softening just slightly as she considered his words, and Jason's arms folded, a silent barrier of judgment, yet even he, the ever-steady rock, felt the stirrings of doubt, the tentative hope that perhaps, beneath the arrogance and deception, lay a man capable of remorse, of change, of humanity, and the interplay of power and vulnerability, of shame and forgiveness, created a tableau of emotion so intense it could ignite the imagination, drawing viewers into the whirlpool of tension, making them feel every scrape, every tear, every trembling word, as if they too were kneeling beside Ronnie, forced to reckon with the consequences of betrayal. Ronnie's chest heaved as he continued to plead, the words almost incoherent. I've hurt everyone, Tracy, Jason, everyone I love, please, please let me make it right. His voice a mixture of sobs and desperation, a river of emotion threatening to flood the room, yet unable to find release as both Tracy and Jason maintained a careful, almost surgical restraint, their judgment precise, their fury controlled, and yet behind the calm veneer, the emotional storm raged. A perfect storm of betrayal and confrontation, and the room seemed to pulse with the weight of the moment. Each second stretching into eternity, as Ronnie, still on his knees, felt the crushing gravity of guilt and the faint, flickering hope of redemption battling within him, the classic soap opera duality of despair and possibility, and as he lowered his forehead almost to the floor, a symbolic act of ultimate submission, a gesture that spoke volumes more than words could ever hope to convey, Tracy finally spoke again, her voice quieter now, almost deliberate, almost careful. Ronnie, if you are truly ready to face the consequences, to show us that you are more than the mistakes you've made, then maybe, just maybe, there's a path forward. And Jason, still silent, nodded imperceptibly, his stoic gaze softening just enough to signal that the road to forgiveness was not entirely closed, that the possibility of redemption, though fraught with pain and difficulty, existed, and Ronnie, lifting his tear-streaked face slightly, dared to hope, dared to imagine that maybe, after the storm of shame, humiliation, and raw emotion, there might be a chance to rebuild, to atone, to reclaim some fragment of dignity in a world that had seemed intent on crushing him entirely. And as he remained kneeling, trembling but determined, he realized that this moment, this epic, soul-shaking, heart-wrenching confrontation, was the kind of moment that defines lives, the kind of scene that soap operas are built upon, where every word, every glance, every heartbeat carries weight, and where, for a man on his knees, begging for forgiveness, the universe itself seems to pause, waiting to see if mercy, justice, or heartbreak will emerge victorious. And in that suspended instant, Ronnie understood fully, completely, and irreversibly, that life had offered him a lesson in humility, and that the journey toward redemption, though treacherous and painful, was the only path left, the only possible resolution to the chaos he had wrought. And with a final shuddering breath, he whispered, almost to himself, almost to the universe, I will not fail. Again, as the room held its collective breath, the air thick with anticipation, the drama reaching a fever pitch, a tableau of emotion, power, and vulnerability so intense it could only exist in the heightened world of soap opera reality, leaving viewers on the edge of their seats, hearts pounding, eyes wide, caught in the thrilling, devastating, utterly human story of a man brought low, forced to kneel, and daring to hope for forgiveness, even in the face of overwhelming odds. And as the camera would slowly zoom in on Ronnie's tear-filled eyes, the glint of remorse and the faintest flicker of hope shining through, the room, the mansion, and perhaps even the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if this man could truly rise again, not just to stand, but to reclaim his soul, one agonizing, heartfelt step at a time, leaving every viewer mesmerized, enthralled, and desperate for the next twist in this endlessly compelling saga of love, betrayal, and redemption.